So the number one question I'm getting right now is, are Ford V8 engines better than Chevy V8 engines and vice versa? People are also saying, are Chevy small blocks better than Ford V8 engines? And I gotta thank everybody for commenting, because the answers are so intelligent. The most common response is, Chevy made a bunch of great V8 engines, or Ford made a bunch of great V8 engines. And they will, with Ford, they will reference what's known as an engine family. Like, for example, like the Windsor small block is popular, or the Cleveland engines. And I would say when you're talking about a Ford Thunderbird, more specifically, they will talk about the Ford Edsel engine. Seems to be the 390 when people were first buying these Thunderbirds in the early 1960s, late 50s. The FE is sort of the bread and butter engine that everybody references, where Chevy, you really talk about the block. Now, the Chevy small block is considered the greatest invention that Chevy has ever had, similar to how Ford's modern assembly line and the Model T and the first mass-produced V8 engine, which was the Ford Flathead, that is considered Ford's greatest invention. So let's talk about maybe what's different about Ford V8 engines and Chevy. Now, Ford V8 engines, you specifically refer to engine families, because see, when Chevy started out with their Chevy small block, they were predominantly coming out of what's known as the Stovebolt 6, or an inline 6 necessarily. And when Chevy brands started going towards pushrod engines, Ford had to quickly come up with their own pushrod engine and drop the Flathead, which was called the Y block. Now, the Y block, unfortunately, was limited in how far it could be displaced. That is actually the main reason. It wasn't because of the oiling issues. That's a big misconception. It was the displacement was very limited. So the FE engines became the immediate replacement for the Y block engines, and the Mercury Edsel Lincoln engines were the big block version of those. But then, to give sort of a more affordable mainstream alternative to Chevy's small block, Ford came out with the Windsor V8, which is known as the Windsor small block, or just the Windsor V8 is a more common term. Now, then what happened is they sort of transitioned to what's known as the Cleveland engines, which the small block versions were based on the 335, and then they also had a 385 big block, which you would not refer to as a Cleveland, you would refer to that as a Lima engine. And then eventually, when the gas restrictions were happening, they went predominantly towards the Windsor small block V8, and then eventually the Lima came out with the 2.3 turbo, which was a great engine. And then eventually Ford went to SOHC engines, and dual overhead cam engines was their